Hello, I'm Robert, and you're welcome here in my busy little shop. On today's episode of What's on My Workbench, I've got a unique belt that I'm going to be working on. I've already got started on it. I have the main body of the belt already laminated together, and I'm getting ready to do the stitching on it. But I wanted to bring you up to speed on where I'm at on this project. This is going to be a Ranger belt. And the point of this video is there's an area that you might be able to grow business in if you so desire. And this is reworking old antique hardware. So in my booths, when I'm talking with my clients about projects that I work on and such, I do mention that, hey, if you've got a belt that has some significance to you, maybe it's a belt that you wore years ago, grandpa's belt, maybe dad's belt, uncle's belt, whatever, that those can be reworked. Sometimes I rework the belt themselves. Maybe it needs to be reinforced, new leather added to it. There's times when it needs to be a new size. I've had people bring me a Ranger belt before, and I disconnect where it's sewn on here and move it down. There's lots of different opportunities to get creative there and return something of, like I said earlier, significance back to use again. So on this one here, this belt here belongs to a friend of mine that had heard me talk about the fact that I could rework, old hardware, and brought this into me. This is an antique belt. It has sterling silver hardware on it, and the belt isn't long enough anymore. And I really do like the patina on here, and that was one of the things we looked at. I'm sure that when this started off, it wasn't dyed. It was just a natural colored leather, and over time of wearing it, it's gained all this character to it. We talked about lengthening this because it needs about 4 more inches in length. We talked about lengthening the belt, but in the end, we decided we'd just make a new belt, and we're going to dye it so that it's a similar color. So here's the belt where I'm at right now, and it's going to be, or it is, Phoebe's golden brown, and I went ahead and I put 1 coat of Resin on it. So to bring you up to speed on this part of the belt, which is the main body of this Ranger style belt, I laminated 2 layers of leather together, much like I normally do, and I created the stitching holes, and I put the first coat of Resin on there. And the reason why I did that is the thread I'm going to use is going to be the Phoebe's in the color beige. 1, 2, 3.5. So I'm just performing a traditional saddle stitch here. Using the Tigeritza thread, a couple John James needles. The stitching chisel I used here was a set that I bought from Weaver years ago. It's a 5mm set, and it's worked really well for me. Hundreds of belts that I've created with that set of stitching irons. The challenge to me, for some people is, where do I start? How's it going to work out using old hardware? And I think, obviously you have to look at the hardware and make sure that it's a good fit to be reworked. There are some hardwares that can be a bit of a challenge. And it seems like to me on these Ranger style belts and that have a tip that is of similar material, a lot of it depends on how that tip has been installed originally. And let's take a quick look at that on this one. And I didn't mention, this one had a little bit of tooling down through the center. I think it was rolled through a press that installed that stitching, because that's not the major feature of this belt. And the owner of this belt didn't necessarily need the stitching and decided to go with just a plain belt. But when I'm looking at the hardware, I'm always looking to see what condition it is. I'm not a silversmith and wouldn't know really where to start. I mean, I suppose I could. This tongue on here has got kind of a funny bend in it here, and I'm not sure if it was done to mimic the shape of this or just over time, since the buckle is that way, that it's been heavily used, that got bent. But I looked at it, and it looks like it's still going to work fine. So I decided not to adjust that, because I probably would have been tempted to straighten up that tongue of the buckle there. So I think it's going to work the way it is. The one thing that gave me a little bit of pause on this set was the back of the tip here. You can see, or at least I think you can see, that all they did was used a punch and drove it through the silver into the leather, and that mushroomed out the back side of the tip to have it hold on there. And it's pretty securely fastened there. So what I think I'm going to need to do, I will see if I can wiggle it and get it pulled out of there. But if I have to, I'll cut it off here, and then I'll use my tools and take a little bit of time and dig this leather out of this area. My intention then is to get in here with a tool and try to flatten some of that back out. It doesn't need to all come out, but I need to get the leather in there and then drive a punch into there to make sure that stays on there. I'd hate for that to get lost. I have had some where the tip didn't want to come off, or it was damaged in some way, and they decided to go without the tip, which, obviously the tip looks really good on there, but it doesn't necessarily need to be there, to be a functioning belt. So I'm going to continue my stitching here. I'm using 2 John James needles, and I mentioned previously it's Tiger Ritza in the color beige, and that's the 0.08 thread that I'm using. Once I've got this belt stitched up here, this portion of it, then I'll come back, and what I need to do is I need to create both of these billets here. And I've done it before where I've removed this from here, and then I've used that and traced it. But I want to return this leather belt to him. My thoughts are that, who knows, maybe one of these days a grandson would pick this up, would take the hardware off of here and go back onto this belt here and be able to utilize that belt. Anyway, I probably think too far ahead. But what I'm going to do is I'll just take and trace this shape, and I've already have some leather layered up over here. Easy for me to say. This is it here. The one thing you have to really take into consideration is that the hardware here is going to dictate some of the elements. In other words, there's only so much leather that will fit in this tip here. So I measured this because it fits very well, and I layered up a 2-layer piece of leather here that I'll cut that billet out of. And the same thing goes for the other end here as well. So I'll come back when I have this stitched up and we're ready to create those billets. The one thing I have to decide on is if I'm going to use stitching around the billet to have it match here. I like the idea of having stitching on here, but I also, it's so much narrower here. I really have to decide if I'm going to do that. I probably will. Either way, I will have beige thread here to hand sew on these billets. So let me get this stitching done. I'm going to think a little bit more on that design element there, and I'll be back here in just a little bit. Okay, so I finished the stitching. I think it turned out really nice. And the next thing I need to do is I need to create these billets. And in the past, I've just taken a rubbing of that. And the thing is, on this one, it was so worn down, and I like the look of it, that it was easier for me just to make a photocopy of that. So I'm just going to cut out that pattern now of that billet, and really all I need is the upper part of it here. And then I'll just put this on some cardstock, and that will be my template that I'll use for both pieces. I know we don't need contact adhesive for this, but it was handy. The one nice thing about contact adhesive is it doesn't wrinkle the paper. So here is my template, and this is the leather. I cut the leather that I lined up. I trimmed the edge. I cut it a little bit longer than I needed. You can see here. I set my draw gauge to the width of the strap up here, the wider part, and then I will trim it to this. So this here is 11/16, so I set it to 11/16. And we'll get her stripped down here. When I have it layered up and I'm cutting two layers, it is a little bit harder to cut, but it is with the other strap cutter as well. All right, now that I have it cut, let me run it through my keepers to make sure that it fits fine there. And the belt, so no issues there. I had a little bit of a bobble here at the beginning where I was getting it started, so I think that'll be the end that I create the hourglass shape on it, for lack of a different term. So I don't know if you can see my scribe line there or not. I think this radius here, I think I'm going to sand that in instead of trimming that. And I'll probably do sanding for the majority of this. But let me get rid of a little bit of this excess here with my knife. And then I'm going to take this over on my Leather Machine Company sander burnisher. And I will get it sanded down here to shape that. And I'm going to wait to cut it to length until I get where I feel like I've got that right, in case I'm shifting this one way or the other a little bit. The main thing is keeping it looking symmetrical and matched side to side. Let's see how this looks. Now, I'm just using a number 1 here, and it's just to get this flange off of here from sanding. I want to see how this looks. Just feeling to see if I've got the curve profile about right. I think I do. It's slightly wider. I thought that was a little bit narrow, and I think I'm going to go with that. I cut the strap for the buckle end, and now I want these to be, it's more important that these match than the other. So I'll scribe this out. And we'll go through the same process again. Like I said, I'm just cutting this to save a little bit of sand time. So I'll take these over on the sander, and I will get to work on that and make sure that they're a matched set. Yeah, I think that feels pretty good. All right, let's take a look at this. This billet here is, I guess depends where you measure. It's 9 ounces there, 10 there, 9.5 there. It's probably changed some back in here from being stretched. This billet here is 9.5. Now, that's important because when I measured here, I'm at about 18.5, and down here is 16. So it's 2.5 ounces thinner here, which the reason why I'm bringing that up is I don't like to have this like that. It's too thick here. Do you see that? It's too thick, and you end up catching it on belt loops. So what I do, now that I have my shape defined on these, I want to make sure I put the bottom side up, which I have here. I'm going to take this last bit here and skive it down to probably half the thickness. Let me practice on this waist piece here. And when I do that, I'm going to remove probably the majority of the back of the leather, if not all of it, and then some of the other. So I'm going to stair step it down like that, so that when it's sewn on, it will be of similar thickness as the billet is on here. So the worst I can do is make a mistake and start over here on these, and I don't want to do that. I'm going to start easy here. Back here, 1.25 inches or so, and I'm just going to ease through here. Okay, so I've got the point here thin enough, and I got to decide if I want to do any more. I think I'm going to try to take off a little bit of this here and make this transition a little bit longer, but I don't want to take any more off the tip. Okay. Just double check, make sure I got the back. Okay. Let's take a look here now. It's going to be sewn in from here to here, between these two areas here. So between those, all I'm going to do is I'm going to run a number 1 around there. And the main reason why I do that really is just to keep from having any fuzz or anything like that sticking out when I install this on there. Okay? And it'll get sewn on then. Now the rest of this, from here forward, I'll be using a number 2 or 3, probably a 3, all the way around this. But I want to get this sewn first. I'm actually going to sew a pattern along the edge, much like I did on the belt here. And then down here, it will be what's used to sew it onto the belt. So I think the next thing I need to do is I need to deal with this tip here, figure out how that's going to go before I start doing any stitching, because I want my stitching to disappear underneath the tip on both runs here. It's pretty thin metal there. I know, it's not what this tool's used for. But I thought I would see if I can get underneath there. I can see it starting to show up underneath there. I had one of these that someone, I think, thought it would be a good idea to use some epoxy in there. I hope this one doesn't have it. I was wanting to keep from using a screwdriver because I thought it might be thicker than what's needed. Began to wonder if there's something else in there. I've got a little thinner screwdriver here. There we go. There's a New Mexico dirt there. I think that looks pretty good. So I'm going to use the tip of this. I wonder, that seems like maybe a little bit of glue was used there. I'm going to use this to shape it. So it looks like I need to take a little bit off of these shoulders here. I'll do that and I'll be right back. Wow, that went too easy. If you ever have it, it's a little bit thick. You can take and hammer it in thickness a little bit to give yourself some relief there. I think that's pretty good. Now I'm not ready to install that yet because I'm going to do a stitch line and I want it to disappear into that tip. I think that looks really good though. Curious what this stitch line is going to look like. I think that's going to work. I've got an idea what I want to do here. I think I want to make these cross each other. I don't know why, but that's just what it spoke to me when I got to here. And this is kind of, well, it's not kind of, this is rounded even though it's fairly straight. And I've tried before on these longer stretches to use a longer chisel, but it really begins to show. So I don't like that either. Let's step this out here, see how we're going to end up. Cheat it back just a little bit here. Okay. Couple more here and then I'll use the straight one. I want to make sure that I'm past any curvature. Once I get this stitched, I will do all my edge work, burnish, and all of that. All right, actually looks pretty good. I'm obviously going to be doing a bunch of finish work on here after I get it stitched. But the way I'm going to stitch this, I'm going to start right here, and I'm going to stitch around the loop here back to here. When I get to here, this is where I'm going to sew it onto the belt. So I want to make sure I have plenty of thread to make it all the way around to here and still have thread to come around this as well. And what I'll do is once I have this all stitched here, I'll get this all burnished, and then I'll lay this on the belt, and then I will stitch through to hold this onto the belt billet from here down. I think that makes sense. I'll bring you back when I'm ready to sew this onto here. So that'll be our next task. All right, let's take a look here. We are ready to sew this on, and I want to get things placed correctly here. You know, obviously that's a obvious statement. 8 1/4, 8 1/4. So I can do it one of two ways. I can start here and sew this down and then assemble this part of it. But I think I'm going to work from the other end because I want to make sure I don't run out of room here. So let's take this apart. See what we got here. All right, taking this apart, I've said before, I learn a lot by seeing how other artists put things together, and I've never created a slot that direction. I suppose it's to take some of the stress off of the working tongue of the buckle, even though I don't know that that's really necessary because it pivots pretty much inside that slot, but I'll think about whether I want to put that in there or not. Either way, the next thing I need to do is to cut this slot here, and I might as well just take some of the guesswork out of it, and I'll make it, it looks like it's centered about 1 inch and 7/16, 1 inch and 7/16 from the tip. So I'll come up here 1 inch and 7/16 there. And just visually checking myself, that looks correct. You would think on something that small that would be easy to keep in line, but it doesn't hurt to put a line there. And I need to have 5/8. Probably by the time you bend it, it always kind of fattens out some. Let me see what size slot punch I've got over here. Looks like that's about the same. That's a 7/8. Yeah, it's kind of tight on my stitching. I'm gonna nibble it out here. Do I want to go the other way or not? You know what? I'm going to. We'll see. Okay. So I'm going to, let me go ahead and make my Chicago screw hole here. Now I need this to go on this part of it. You know what? I'm thinking a dry fit, but what if I like how it works? I might as well be prepared for that, right? I've got a matte nickel Chicago screw here. I think it won't stand out as much as a nickel plated brass would. I can see that notch is important with the bend that's in that, and I'm assuming that bend is on purpose on there. And in the past, the way I've done this is I visually line it up in the center. And I tack it in place with an awl. Well, there's going to be a screw here. I think that's going to be about right. All right, I think now that I am happy with where everything's at, I have this tacked in place and hold this end centered, and I'm just going to go around here now with my awl, and I'm going to mark where each of these go. Okay, I have my stitching holes laid out. I'm going to put that Chicago screw in last, if you were wondering. Probably weren't, but just in case you were. Okay. And since this is going to be the most stressful spot on this stitching, I'm going to go around this twice. Now, there's one thing I've done in the past, depending on if I think this is going to lift up, and I don't think it's going to, but I have done a stitch here that comes across here and then comes up around and over here and continues on. And by doing that, it helps to tie that down out just a little bit further, but I think it's going to be fine. Let's go back the other way now. Bit of an angle there. Okay, back through here again. Now, if you want to melt these off, I think it would be plenty strong to do that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to, one reason why I leave it this way, I'll bring this needle through here. And this one through here. Come on, cooperate. There we go. And I'm just going to tie a square knot here. I need a new battery in my zapper. I'm just going to pre-tension this a little bit here. There we go. We are good to go. Let's work on the other end now. So to install this one, my goal is to have the two tips line up. But if I need to shift it a little bit one way or the other, I don't think that's going to be a big deal, because we need to make sure that our adjustment holes are in the right place. So it's going to be a 38-inch belt, which is going to be here. And that gives us 4.5 to the end. I think I'm going to shift it a little bit. Not much, just a little bit. Let's see how that looks again. 38. There'll be a hole at 36 through 40, and I think that's pretty good. So I'm going to overlap this by about a 1/4 inch on the tip. So I'm just going to go ahead and do what I did on the other end. I don't want to bore you guys too much here. Where'd you go, Mr. All? And I'm just lining these up. I'll mark these and do like I did on the other end, and then I'll be back here in just a little bit. We need to put the tip on this belt, and I feel like there's something I've forgotten. I'll look it over and see what it is. Daggone it, guys. I bring you guys along hoping you'll help me remember things. I forgot to put my keeper on the back that helps keep the belt aligned, so now I need to take this apart here and slide that on there. I wondered why those were touching, because I like that keeper in there. It helps keep those from rubbing and wearing on each other. Let's put this back together now. And I finished sewing this end on. We've got a couple of things left to do. One, we need to put our adjustment holes in. So let's do that now. And that is a pretty small tongue there. Let's see if we can figure out what size hole it should be. That's probably about right. I'm going to go with the 1/3 from the biggest there. $38. Let's see how that's going to work. I think that's pretty good as far as the hole size goes. Let's take a look and see here. I moved this keeper back a little bit. I think it fit back there better. It doesn't have to go between the two. I just thought it would help keep maybe from having as much wear on there. Wear on there. Oh, got rhyming going on again. So that goes like that. The last thing I need to do is to put the tip on.
It'll be like that. So let's get that done now. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. Let me look at it here. I think that's going to hold it pretty well. It seemed like the other one had a little dot of something on there. I'm going to put some glue on here. Don't put it on upside down. This is bowed up a little bit. It was that way before I started, but I exaggerated it some with the work I was doing. So I'm going to straighten that out some. We'll go slow at it. I'm glad I went slow because it didn't take much. A little bit of that white glue squeezed out. Looks about right. Go a little bit smaller and mushroom that some more. Yeah, yep, I think that'll stay. Let's put it together one more time, see how it looks. I think it looks pretty good. Well, there you go. I think it turned out really nice. The person that owns the belt will be happy, I think, to get it back and put it into use. He said he used to wear it, quite regularly. And I leaned on the thinner side of the leather that I typically use for a belt. We're at 10 ounces here. This billet here is about 9 ounces. And when you think about it, especially on a Ranger belt, this area here is going to be the weakest area on the whole belt because, obviously it's more substantial than the body of the belt. And I was doing that to try to limit some of the thickness here. From here down, I also skived down and got thinner. So down in here where this connection's made, we're probably about 9 ounces there as well. Just working to reduce the overall thickness of it there. Some of my first Ranger belts were really pretty beefy here. And I think this is a good compromise. I need to put my maker's mark in it yet. Probably deliver it yet today. And I think it turned out good. I do appreciate you being here with me in the shop today. Please like, share, and subscribe. But more importantly, I do hope you have a great day.